So I just finished playing the Callisto Protocol. I played through it completely. Well, I didn't just finish beating it. I beat it about a day and a half ago, and then I had to think about it. And now I feel like I'm ready to truly dive into it and talk about it and give you all my final thoughts. If you haven't yet, you should check out my first impressions video of the Callisto Protocol that I released the day it came out. It was a video I made just talking about it after I played it for a few hours, but this video is me again talking about all of it. Before I get too deep into this video, I'm going to show you gameplay and there will be spoilers, but also consider subscribing. I do TV show discussions, trailer reactions, movie discussions, that sort of thing, and I absolutely love survival horror gaming. I talk about it very frequently on this page. I'm going to talk about Dead Space when it comes out, Resident Evil 4 Remake when it comes out. I do trailer reactions to horror games, that sort of thing. So just check it out. Check out some of these videos. One video that I know I'm going to make for sure when Dead Space comes out and when I finish Dead Space is that I'm going to make a video directly comparing these two new space horror games. So I'm going to break this video up into two parts. First, I'm going to talk about the gameplay and the pros and the cons of that. And then I'm going to talk about the plot and the story and then the pros and cons of that. When it comes to the gameplay with the Callisto Protocol, you can really see what they were going for, what they were trying to do. And what they were trying to do is make one of the most immersive, challenging, and scary survival horror games to date. There's absolutely no HUD in this whole entire game, and as far as I'm aware, I don't believe that there's even an option to turn HUD on. No map either. If you watched my previous video, you would see that I mentioned that I hope there's a map eventually. Turns out there's no map in the whole entire game, but I'm actually fine with that because it really does add to the immersiveness. The combat is so meaty, and it packs a hell of a punch. If you watched my first video, you'd see that I compared it to the Last of Us gameplay, and after finally beating the game, I think that that's a fair comparison. The combat and the melee combat is obviously not similar to the Last of Us at all, but what is similar, and what I'm trying to say, is that how the Last of Us was so intense, this is also so intense. It feels like every punch, every swing of your weapon, every time you fire your gun matters. Every enemy that you see is a threat. Every enemy that you see, you have to be on your A game if you don't want to be murdered. And that was the case with The Last of Us, and I feel like that is 100% the case with Callisto Protocol as well. The areas that you're in are so claustrophobic, and that combined with just the creepy sound design makes for a really freaky game. And like I mentioned, the difficulty is actually challenging. I played on normal mode. I believe it was called medium security, and it was difficult. I died more in this game than I've died in a game in a very, very, very long time. Its normal mode is comparable to a lot of games' hard modes. And I did mess around with easy mode a little bit, and even in easy mode, I died quite a bit. And I really, really appreciate that this game is difficult, because one of my biggest complaints with video games in general these days is that normal mode is far too easy, and then hard mode is, you know, very, very hard, which isn't a bad thing. It's just that someone like me, I want something in the middle of what's considered normal and hard these days. And I feel like Callisto Protocol gives me that. I believe you have 5 different firearms in this game, and each one feels incredibly unique. Every single gun in this game feels distinct and different from the others, and each gun serves its purpose. Like, there are areas when you're going through this game where you're like, yep, I better equip the riot gun, or yeah, I really need the hand cannon right now. And the upgrade bench could have been a bit better now that I've gone through most of the upgrades for all of the guns, but one thing I do appreciate is the alternate fire abilities for all the guns. It really is a cool and fun way to change up the gameplay. When it comes to level design and survival horror, my standards are incredibly high. When I look back at all my favorite survival horror games, Resident Evil 4, The Evil Within, games like that, I remember very unique and distinct areas. And I'm not gonna lie to you, the Callisto Protocol doesn't have that many memorable areas, but there are quite a bit sprinkled throughout, and I appreciate that. At first, I thought it wasn't gonna have any, but when the game ended, I thought about my whole playtime, and there was like 5 or 6 very memorable areas that I went to, and that's, you know, 5 or 6 more than a lot of other recent survival horror games. So not really a praise here, but also it could have been a lot worse. Now I'm going to talk about a lot of the cons that I have with the Callisto Protocol in terms of gameplay. And the whole time that I was playing this game, one saying kept coming to my mind, and that is the The very commonly used saying of death by 1,000 cuts. I don't think it's that dramatic. I've seen a lot of people say this game is absolute trash, it's an absolute failure, that it's broken, that it's a horrible, horrible game, and I definitely do not think that is the case. Again, at the end of the day, I did enjoy this game. I do really, really recommend playing it if you're a survival horror fan. But it does have a lot of minor problems that really do bring the game down. This game is linear to the 10th degree. This game is practically the definition of the most linear of all linear games that one could get. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people that complains whenever a game isn't open world. I know there's a lot of people like that. Yes, I love open world games, but most of my favorite video games of all time are linear games. Again, Resident Evil 4 is a linear game, The Evil Within is a linear game, The Last of Us is a linear game. There's absolutely nothing wrong with linear games, but this game is practically walk in a straight line the game. When I made my first Callisto Protocol review, I was only a few hours into it, and some of the most open areas in the game are in those first few hours. But as the game progresses and as I kept playing it, you really don't gotta worry about missing much. It is walk in a straight line, walk wherever the game wants you to walk. Every now and then there's a side area that you can go to, but it really is walk in a straight line, the game. And don't even remind me of how many times that the objective is find the fuse. In my pros section, I mentioned about how this game was difficult and how I appreciated the difficulty, and I stand by that. I do think that is true. But also, a lot of the difficulty in this game sometimes just feels cheap. So I'm going to talk about the Soulsborne games for a second. Yes, I know whenever a game is difficult, people bring up the Soulsborne games. But I feel like that's for a reason. The Soulsborne games are very challenging and very difficult, but it never feels impossible. It always feels doable. It always feels like a healthy challenge that one can overcome when they adapt and they learn and they get the certain skill sets and they learn from their mistakes and they try again. And I'm not saying the Callisto Protocol is impossible, obviously. I'm not saying that. I beat it. I feel like most people who liked it can beat it, and they can beat it, you know, pretty easily. I don't think anyone is going to get stuck to the point where they can't finish the game. But some of the most difficult parts of this game just feel cheap. It really feels like put giant enemy here that will kill you in one shot, and then while the player is focusing on that, throw at them a whole bunch of different enemies. So some of the most challenging parts of this game don't feel like a fair competition. It doesn't feel like smart enemy design. It doesn't feel like a smart level design. It feels just like, let's overwhelm the player. And sometimes that can just be stressful. And my God, did I mention how annoying it is to experience the same 2 jump scares like every 20 minutes in this game? Like, I can't tell you how many times one of those creepy little bugs jumped out of a locker or jumped out of a chest, or one of those long-necked fucks tried to attack me and I had to cut off its head. It was creepy the first time, but my God, that is like some PS3 era shit, having them be every 20 minutes in this whole game. And you know, there are a decent amount of enemy types, and as you progress in this game, as you get a decent way through this game, you're able to tell the enemies apart. You know how many times they're going to attack you, when you have to dodge, how many attacks that you can put on them before they recover, how many bullets it'll probably take, if they're a mega threat, if they're not a threat, if you should focus on them first, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, all enemies result in the same sort of gameplay, which is dodge, 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 hit, hit, dodge, 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 hit, 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 dodge, dodge, hit, hit, hit. And again, I do like the gameplay for this game. I think it is really fun timing your dodges and hitting them with your melee combos and knowing when to fire your gun and when not to fire your gun. I like the gameplay, but I just wish that they incorporated a couple more gameplay elements, maybe a few more abilities for Jacob to use to change up the gameplay a little bit so it didn't feel like every type of enemy resulted in killing them the same way. And boss fights. I really, really enjoy the boss fights in this game. I thought that their designs were pretty cool, but there needed to be more of them. There came to a point in this game where I thought there was going to be no boss fights. I thought maybe it was going to be one of those games that has one boss at the end and that's it. Luckily, about 2/3 of the way through the game, I believe, I came across the first boss fight, and it was difficult. It was really hard, especially since I went into that fight having practically no ammo. It did take me quite a few attempts to finally beat that boss, but I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. When I finally beat him, I felt successful. I felt accomplished. I felt like I learned and I adapted and I overcame and I won. But then they reused that same boss fight, not one, not two, but 3 other times after that. And each time that you fought that boss afterwards, they felt easier and easier, which part of me appreciates because it would kind of be a pain in the ass fighting a difficult boss as frequently as they ended up throwing them at you. But on the other hand, it kind of lessens how scary that monster seemed the first time that you fought him. And then the final boss was cool enough. I feel like the area that you fought him in should have been bigger. It should have been a more open arena with other difficult challenges around, but again, it ended up using the same cheap difficulty that I was talking about earlier, where this boss is hard to fight and he's on your ass constantly, and you need to focus on him. And if you don't focus on him, he'll kill you, and he'll kill you very fast. And as you're focusing on him, they just send a bunch of those crawling suicide bomber aliens at you, and yeah. And you know, again, it's not undoable. It's not unbeatable. You can do it, and you can do it, again, fairly easy. It's just that it feels cheaply difficult. I just wish it felt more like a true, genuine challenge. Now I'm going to talk about the plot of the game. The plot was something that I was very, very excited for, and I was very, very interested in whenever I watched a Callisto Protocol trailer. And when I put the game in, one of the things that probably the thing I was hyped for the most was the plot. And it does start strong. You're quickly introduced to many interesting characters. Jacob Lee, Danny, Elias, and Captain Ferris all seem like they're going to be incredibly cool and memorable characters. But my hope for the plot died really, really fast, because the first about 2/3 of this game, the plot just isn't there. It's just you trying to escape the prison, and that's it. All the cool characters that you're introduced to just go MIA and don't come back until the very end. I mentioned in my first Callisto Protocol video that the characters seem to be very, very likable, that I thought they were going to be genuine characters, that I didn't think they were going to be what so many other video games do with their side characters, which is have them just be voices over a radio that tell you what to do next. They give you your missions, they give you your objectives, they give you your fetch quests. And Elias as a character at first didn't seem like he was going to be that way, and then he was that way. All he was a voice on a radio telling you where to go, telling you what to do, and I was so disappointed. And spoiler alert here, but by the time he became an interesting character, 3 minutes later, he was dead. And then Danny comes into the plot as a strong supporting character as soon as Elias is killed. And she's an interesting character. I did like her, but, you know, the plot between her and Jacob really could have been stronger. I have a feeling that she's going to be the focus of some DLC content in the future. That's my guess. And Captain Ferris, Sam Witwer, I love this dude. He had such a strong performance in the very beginning of this game. And then he goes MIA, and you see him briefly about halfway through. Like, I mean very briefly, like for half a second, maybe 3-5 seconds max. And then he comes back as the final boss, and it's just like completely wasted. And the warden of the prison, you know, couldn't be more blander. But it really, really sucks because the last third of this game, okay, maybe not the last third, the last quarter of this game, the plot picked up, and the plot picked up fast, and the plot picked up strong. And I was liking the plot, and then the game ended. And the game ended on such a bullshit cliffhanger. Like, I don't mind cliffhangers in a lot of the stories that I consume, whether it be a video game or a movie or a novel or whatever. But this cliffhanger just left me feeling like I didn't get a finished product. It felt like the story wasn't over. It felt like the journey that I began didn't have a conclusion. I honestly felt cheated with this ending, and I don't remember a time that I ever felt this way with a video game ever. And honestly, it's just very clear to me that they're giving us some lame cliffhanger so we buy the DLC. And you know what? I'm gonna get the DLC because I liked the game at the end of the day. I liked the gameplay, I liked the characters, the plot that was there, I enjoyed. I just wish there was more of it. And yeah, I'm gonna get the DLC. Well, there it is. That's my final thoughts on the Callisto Protocol. I know most of the video was negative now that I look back at it. But don't get me wrong, I did enjoy the game, and I think you will enjoy the game too, especially if you're a survival horror fan. If you are a fan of Resident Evil, Dead Space, The Evil Within, The Last of Us, stuff like that, I do think you're going to find some genuine enjoyment in the Callisto Protocol. So I do recommend playing this game, but I especially recommend playing it if you are a survival horror fan. Though $70 might be a bit pricey for this. I'd say pay $40 for it, maybe. But anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far. And once again, consider subscribing. I love survival horror video games, and I'm going to talk about them a lot on this page. Thank you for watching.